All right, so thank you for tuning in to Chomping at the Bit. I'm Kyler, of course. Hope you're having a great day and, everything's going well with you. So, this was a subject that I was going to probably push back a couple of days, but after what happened in the NBA on Tuesday night, I feel like it was as good of an opportunity as any to talk about one LeBron James. Now, the reason why I want to talk about it is now that the Lakers have been officially eliminated, so that means no play-in tournament, no playoffs, nothing this year. I guess I just had a lot on my mind. So I kind of want to just, let it all out on here and, kind of let you know where my thinking is with LeBron in the grand scheme of things. And also by the end of the episode, I would obviously like to hear from you as to, if you agree with what I'm about to tell you or not. So definitely do that. And easiest way is probably following me on Twitter at Chomping Podcast, because I do tweet a lot over there. Some of the stuff I'm going to say on here, I've tweeted out on Twitter at some point, so you get a good idea of where I'm coming from with a lot of these episodes. But with that, let's go ahead, jump into this, and hopefully enjoy it. So, over the course of this season, I do think a lot of the, I don't want to say hate, but I guess a lot of the counter argument for me in terms of LeBron, when people make these arguments about him being the greatest of all time and all this kind of stuff, I feel like this season has encompassed a lot of the issues that I've had with making that argument for LeBron. And one, the biggest thing is a lot of people in the media, as well as YouTube or whatever, have kind of made this phony argument for LeBron to create this narrative that he's the greatest of all time. Now, I'm not one to say that I've seen every NBA player play. One, I'm not old enough to see them. So, I can recognize, what Bill Russell did, but I didn't see him play, so I guess I'd be coming at it from a different angle. But for me, since the first day LeBron stepped into the league, automatically the comparisons were made to Jordan. I mean, Jordan was a guy that I did see a lot. So for me, that's an easy comparison to make for me. So that's probably going to be the main focus of this episode, is those two. But that's no disrespect to the other great players that have played in the NBA. So, getting back on topic here. But the first thing that they'll point to is, LeBron's age, longevity, all that kind of stuff. And they use that for everything that he's done and seem to automatically make that the reason he's the greatest of all time. Which I guess is cool and all, but I think LeBron's longevity speaks more to the, evolution of the athlete. As we get further along with advancements in medicine and all this kind of stuff, and the knowledge that people know about nutrition and all that, I mean, I'm expecting athletes now to be in better shape than athletes from the 90s, the 80s, 70s, and all that. So the greatness, whatever, that we've seen LeBron accomplish now, that's not to say in 20 years we won't see a guy there who may play longer, play more games than LeBron. So I don't think that's the greatest, category to look at in terms of greatest. But then, the other thing they talk about is, I guess LeBron's ability to, he's like a guaranteed winner or something like that. It's just not true though. And with LeBron people, they always say that people only pick Michael Jordan because he went 6 for 6 in the NBA Finals, which kind of downplays the fact that Jordan did go 6 for 6. But you know what? You want to look at it in the grand scheme of things? So LeBron's played in 19 years in the NBA. He's won 4 titles. So 4 and 19. Which, that's 20% of your career. It's not bad. Jordan won 6 in, I think, 13 years. That's almost half his career. It's a higher percentage. So, you can look at it that way. Jordan comes out on top. Then it's, other little things that they, talk about to try to, bring LeBron up to that level. My issue has always been when you talk to somebody who's a LeBron fan and you counteract any of those points, instead of, coming back with a LeBron stat, they'll come back with an argument to downplay somebody else in history. Mainly like 4 guys. It's either Steph Curry, number 1. They will talk about him more than anybody. Then it's probably Jordan 2. Then KD, Giannis. I mean, if you don't believe me, find somebody who's a LeBron fan. When they come at you with something, criticize something about LeBron's game. And I guarantee you one of those 4 players will be somebody that they'll throw out at you to try to say they're not as good as LeBron is in the thing that you're criticizing him for. But I guess even with that, let's make it more central to this season. If you look at the Lakers season, that's still got 3 games left in it, but it's going nowhere fast. It's kind of a microcosm of LeBron's career. Actually, well, you know what? You could look at LeBron's 4 years in LA, but more so this year. LeBron gets to LA. What's the first thing that happens? We start seeing young players get traded away or kind of let go in free agency to bring in older players. So if I was to make the argument that I have this player right here who's the greatest of all time, but I have a roster of some young players who, could use that expertise, because we know with his greatness, it would elevate their level. You'd be like, yeah, sign me up for that. My thing is, what young player, or even some of these older established players that have been brought in to play with LeBron, how many of them has he actually made better in any way? And I would give you all the time you need in the world to really think about that. Because that's something I was wondering the other day. In terms of young players, I can't think of any. Most times, LeBron plays with some young guys. The season doesn't go well. And those young players become the scapegoat for LeBron's lack of success. And because of that, fan bases turn on those players and they get sent away. But then they'll turn around if those players do well somewhere else and say the organization was stupid for letting them go. And the lack of accountability that fans and media people will put on LeBron, which is kind of going to be a reoccurring sentiment throughout this rant or whatever you want to call it, but the lack of acknowledging like LeBron's obligation in all this is part of the reason why the so-called opposition that LeBron fans like to refer to as haters, kind of why they're around. Because there's a lot in LeBron's game that you can critique. Trust me, there's plenty of it. But for his side to act like, it's some type of blasphemy to bring any of it up is, I think, where a lot of these issues lie. So, like I just said, young players don't get better under him. Star players that we've seen, we'll say established players that we've seen end up in situations playing with LeBron, it always seems like those players need to take a backseat to LeBron in order for him to shine, whereas we never see him do the same for those players. For example, when LeBron left Cleveland, went to Miami, they had Dwayne Wade, and then Chris Bosh came along. What do we remember about that trio in Miami? We remember Dwayne Wade turning over the reins to LeBron and saying it was his team. Dwayne Wade was the guy who had been in Miami all of his career, but LeBron gets there right away. It had to be LeBron's team. That's kind of a minor thing because Wade was, I guess, slowing down at that point, and Dwayne Wade realized that LeBron was the guy that he would need if he wanted to win another title. So I get that. But let's take a look at Chris Bosh. You remember Chris Bosh at Toronto. Chris Bosh was like an all-around player. He played in the post. He took guys off the dribble, played in the mid-range, and he played out in the perimeter and could shoot the three. He gets to Miami, didn't really get to do much of that. Miami, he was relegated to basically a corner three-point shooter. So Chris Bosh had to take the all-around aspect away from his game so that he could fit in LeBron's game. Because LeBron, for him to have any success, needs to have the paint open with lanes to the hoop. Because we know that LeBron's not a confident shooter, especially late in games. But yeah, so you can't have Chris Bosh hanging around the hoop because then that brings in another defender that could get in LeBron's way on his way to the hoop. So Bosh lived out on the outside. Luckily, he was a competent enough three-point shooter that he could do that. Keep looking at other examples. Russell Westbrook. Look at him this year. Now, for all the sources and NBA insiders, they'll tell you that LeBron was a big reason why the Lakers went and got Russell Westbrook when everybody knew. And once we heard about the Buddy Hield deal that was kind of floating around out there, that was the better move. They went Russell Westbrook. And don't get me wrong, Russell Westbrook is a good player. But that's if you use him correctly and you allow him to do Russell Westbrook things. So if you pay attention to Russell Westbrook's career, where is he? What system puts him in the greatest position to succeed? He has to be a guy who has the freedom to grab a rebound, go coast to coast, play up tempo, get to the rim. But then the Lakers bring him in to be a guy who plays off the ball, off LeBron, which then brings into scope his shooting ability more. And Russell Westbrook has never been a good shooter. I actually believe what he's shooting this year is kind of in line with what he has shot for his career. But for some reason, Laker fans have acted like, Russell Westbrook has sunk their season. No, he hasn't, because he's just performing at his average level for what you're asking him to do. So they brought Westbrook in, took away his whole game, and focused on the one part that's the weakest of his game in order for him to play with LeBron on the court. And one of the things I said when they first got him was, if you're going to make that move, you cannot have those two on the court together. Well, mainly because of, injury or inability. Yes, they were on the court way too much, but they didn't spend all their time on the court together. And I mean, Westbrook, he had those 2 years back to back where he averaged triple doubles. I mean, he did get some triple doubles this year, but you watch the Lakers play and you could tell Westbrook is not a fit for that team, especially with LeBron on the team. But now, fast forward to now that their season's over, who are we hearing about as the scapegoats for this team? Russell Westbrook's inability to make shots. That's not his strength. Anthony Davis is another one. You know that guy that they traded a lot of their young assets to get. Now he was off injured in New Orleans. He gets to the Lakers. He's been off injured. So what you're going to hear for this year not working? Anthony Davis was hurt all the time. That's par for the course. That's what he is. He's a big man who gets hurt a lot. We've seen it throughout history. Some big men, they just continually have lower body issues, whether it's a knee or an ankle or whatever. But magically, the Lakers have been surprised that he's missed so much time. That's what he is. Frank Vogel, who got the coaching job after being a successful coach in Indiana, gets the job, but the very minute he gets the job, we're hearing that he wasn't the first choice, or probably even the second choice. Maybe not even the third choice, but he got the job, and it seemed like from day one, they were kind of laying down the path for what's going to come in the offseason when he's probably going to lose his job. And the narrative is going to come from the LeBron people. Well, some of them, maybe not all of them. They'll try to make it seem like Frank Vogel can't coach or was probably an overrated coach. That's not the story either. The fact is, Vogel was saddled with a aging guy in LeBron, even though, they'll tell you that LeBron's the best shape of any NBA player and all this whatever stuff. But he's saddled with a guy who's supposed to be the leader of the team. But as the leader of the team, LeBron only wants to focus on the offensive end of the floor pretty much for the first 3 quarters. Because we've seen over the course of this season, there's been quite a few fourth quarters where he's kind of disappeared in games that ultimately they would have needed to make the play-in. But that's a whole other thing. And normally, your leader of your team kind of leads the defensive charge. And what we've seen, if you watch Laker games, LeBron plays zero defense. I mean, you may think I'm over exaggerating, but he plays none. It's basically turned into, as the season went on, they would come down defensively, and that's even if LeBron makes it across half court, because there's been times where he'll just stand in the offensive end, argue some bogus call to a ref, leave the Lakers 5-on-4 in defense, which leads to wide open shots. But whatever. I guess he's allowed to do that because he's LeBron. But if he does make it back for defense, it's him either guarding the probably the number 5 option on the floor. So basically a guy who's just going to stand in the corner and kind of stay out of everybody's way. That's who LeBron's going to guard. Or it turns into him guarding a guy in the perimeter when they run pick and roll like every other team does. And LeBron kind of just floats away and leaves the guy wide open to only turn around and blame everybody else for what's happening on defense. And I gotta say, that has to weigh on people. Because one, going back to the same young players of Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, all those guys who were with LA, Lonzo Ball. You remember that season? It got so bad that, visiting fans, fans on the road, and even some fans at Staples, I guess it was still called Staples Arena back then, were telling these players that they were going to get traded. So what kind of locker room does that create where young players are looking over their shoulder waiting for the word of them getting sent away somewhere because it's not going well for LeBron, and obviously it has to be their fault? Or the Westbrook stuff from this year, where we've basically seen Westbrook go from a guy who played like the only thing that mattered was on the court, and he could care less about outside noise or what other players thought about him because he would just give it back to them as much as they trash talk him. That has turned into him game after game sitting at a podium and basically breaking down. He's getting asked tough questions. He's giving these answers like, that's not important to me and all this kind of stuff. The whole Westbrook stuff, which, to be honest with you, for the kind of chance that fans have come up with, over the course of my time watching sports, them calling Westbrook because of his bad shooting is about as mild as it gets. And Westbrook took it like the biggest threat on him like ever. Like, he talked about family not wanting to go to games, him not wanting his family at games, and all this kind of stuff. But then when you think about it, maybe that's because in Westbrook's mind, he's kind of shooting what he normally shoots. So to be called Westbrook, maybe that's what, I don't know. But you're seeing the developments here. So for me, it's the narrative about LeBron being an instant winner wherever he goes. It's always been like a double-edged sword for me, because if LeBron's teams do well, all we hear about is LeBron's greatness. But when the teams ultimately don't win, what usually happens? It's everybody else's fault. Or, LeBron has forced the front office to make so many moves that make zero sense that once it bottoms out, LeBron dips, goes somewhere else, leaves the organization with these pieces that they can't really get rid of because nobody wants them, and then they can't win with them. We saw that his first time with Cleveland when he left. It was basically Kyrie left with a bunch of old guys that didn't fit Kyrie's style of play, and Kyrie got kind of I guess Kyrie kind of felt some type of way about that, but LeBron, picked up, went off, formed a super team somewhere, and he's living the good life. So I say all that to say that, is LeBron a great player? Sure. Yes, he is. But when it comes to making him the greatest player is where I have a big issue. And with that, we will hear the LeBron fans dismiss this season like it doesn't matter. But they'll make fun of Jordan's 2 seasons in Washington which if you look at them, I think the Wizards went like 37-45 each season. This Lakers squad that media people tried to tell people when they brought in Carmelo and all these guys that this Lakers team was going to run through the West, they're barely going to win 35 games. And at least with Jordan back then, it was still the 8-team playoff. They expanded it to 10 for a play-in, and this Lakers squad can't even get into that. Now, mind you, for most of this year, the Pelicans haven't had Zion Williamson. They didn't really want to win anything this year, but because of the Lakers' inability, the Pelicans found themselves into the play-in tournament. San Antonio did not want to win this year, but Lakers' inability forced San Antonio into the play-in race. Then San Antonio started actually playing good basketball, and they've now gotten in while the Lakers, like I said, have been eliminated officially from it. If you look at those teams' records, they're not exactly blowing everybody away. I think the Pelicans are like 8 or 10 games under 500. The Spurs are like 10 games under 500. The Lakers are like 16 games under 500 now. So, I mean, it's just crazy to me how this all happened. Why LeBron was the guy that it seems like so many people are willing to like die on that hill to make sure that he's remembered as the greatest of all time, even though he isn't. Because to me, if you're going to be the greatest player of all time, you have to be great at something. So would you say LeBron's one of the greatest scorers you've ever seen? I don't know if you would. You definitely wouldn't say he's the greatest shooter you've ever seen, because he's not. You wouldn't say he's the greatest defender you've seen, because he's not. You wouldn't say he's the greatest clutch player you've seen, because he's far from that. So how is it that he could be the greatest of all time, but he's not really great at any one aspect? Well, not the greatest at any one aspect of basketball. Conversely, you look at Jordan, most people would argue that Jordan might be the best scorer of all time and the best clutch player of all time. A lot of them will tell you he's probably the greatest on-ball defender of all time that they've seen. So, once again, the arguments just don't make sense to me. So then, LeBron people will say, well, you can't really evaluate LeBron on stats like that because he's a different type of player. And I'm okay with that. I can live with that. So for me, that would mean that LeBron should be, I guess, leading the league in plus minus, or I think it's like RPM, which is some other plus minus rating. And with plus minus, that basically factors in your teammates as well as your opponent and all that kind of stuff wrapped into one value. I was looking at that the other day. LeBron hasn't even led the league in that, and I don't know if he's actually done it at any point in his career. I went back like 10, 12 years and I stopped looking because I was assuming at some point he probably never did. And it always seemed like years where he had great plus minuses, he was always behind certain people. A lot of those years he was behind a Steph Curry or a Durant or James Harden or Giannis. A lot of the same players you'll hear LeBron people try to drag down to make LeBron look better. So he doesn't win in an all-around type number of evaluation like plus minus. He doesn't win with individual stats, but somehow he's still the greatest of all time. Which to me just does not make any sense. And, another thing I have a big problem with is the almost disrespect in terms of, one, the way they view other great players, and two, looking at this year, you realize for a lot of this year, they were putting LeBron in the MVP conversation like he deserved to be there. Like, yes, I get it. He's averaging 30 points a game or whatever. But once again, you look at plus minus. LeBron's at like minus 120 on the year. You look at guys like Jokic, Tatum, Embiid, all those guys. They're all like plus 200, 300 or whatever. So clearly LeBron's 30 points a game has less value on the team because the team stinks. And when he's on the court, the team is still operating at a minus. So he's not impacting the game in any way. But now the media is trying to make it seem like we're supposed to care about LeBron possibly winning a scoring title in his 19th season. Which, okay, win the scoring title, but it's led to no team success and hasn't led to a postseason appearance. And which led to me saying, I think it was like last week on Twitter, which I said, follow me at Chamba Podcast, that at least in my memory as a sports fan watching the NBA, this has been one of the more overrated seasons I have seen from a guy that I could remember. Because like I said, all they focused on is this 30 points a game, year 19, 37 years old. Defensively, Lakers are one of the worst teams. In part to LeBron. Like I said, expanded playoff, 10 teams. They can't make that, in part of LeBron. The whole sideshow aspect of LeBron, at this point and for a few years now, it seems to outweigh the impact LeBron actually has on the court. There's a lot of LeBron, associating titles to himself. What I mean is, when they beat the Warriors, that 73-win team or whatever, if you remember, LeBron did that show that he has or whatever, The Shop, I think. And he said that when they won that, in his mind, he was the greatest player of all time. Conversely, I saw some interviews and stuff where people talked to Jordan about that. And Jordan said, basically paraphrasing here, he didn't play the game to be the greatest of all time. He played the game to win. That's all he cared about was winning rings. So, two very different ways of looking at a championship there. But hey, you're inclined to feel however you want to feel about any success in your career. Got no problem with that. But it always seems like LeBron will take it upon himself to either tell you how great he is, or when something doesn't go right, how much of a kind of barrier he had to deal with. Once again, the other night when he scored the 36 or whatever in the game, when he had like 34 through 3 quarters and only 2 in the fourth quarter. I think it was that game, but it was one of those games. He goes to the podium after the game after yet another loss, and he was like, oh, when he rolled his ankle, he was surprised that he could even finish the game. But when he did roll the ankle, it was basically in the same fashion that most NBA players have rolled their ankle several times, even though some people on TV the next day try to make it seem like it was much worse than it was, talking about, his bone hit the floor and they couldn't believe he came back from it. Okay, I saw the replay several times. A bunch of players have done that and have played. So let's not pretend like LeBron was this big, superhuman superhero who, found the guts to finish the game or whatever. It's just sad to listen to on a daily basis, but I get it. They're LeBron fans. They're sticking up for their guy. But yeah, so like I said, LeBron is a great player, yes. But with that, there's a lot of warts to his resume that I think need to be acknowledged when making the argument of whether he is the greatest of all time. One thing I just said, there's been several times in his career where he's had moments in crucial situations where, fourth quarters, he kind of, what's the best way to put it? Kind of takes himself out of the flow of play. And we kind of know why that is. Like I said, he's not the greatest shooter. And with that, his free throw shooting late in games is awful. There's a very good chance if it's late fourth quarter, LeBron happens to get fouled. If he has to make both free throws to tie the game or whatever, you can guarantee yourself he's not making both of them. There's a good chance he'll miss both, but for the most part, he'll make one out of two. And that's another thing. That falls under being a clutch player. So if I told you I had this player who late in the game may shy away from the ball because they know their limitations on the free throw line or their limitations in terms of making a big shot late, to me, that's a point away for being the greatest of all time. We saw with Jordan, several times late in games, the ball was in his hands and we knew he was going to take a jump shot, whether you double teamed him or whatever. And for the most part, he'd make a lot of them. But that mentality is, I think, something that LeBron does miss at times, where when you're the number one guy, you have to be comfortable with taking that responsibility and either making it or missing it and living with it. We saw Jordan do it. LeBron at times either takes himself fully away from it or fails at those moments. And usually when he fails, there's some type of excuse that's going to come with it once he gets to the podium after the game. Biggest one for me, there was a playoff series that they lost. Might have been against the Celtics when they had the big three. And all of a sudden, LeBron goes to the podium with like a soft cast on his hand, which nobody knew anything about, an arm or hand injury. But he's up there, made sure to put that hand out in front on the table for everybody to see. And it's stuff like that he does that just gets on my nerves because he does it so often. And since so many people in the media are on his side, they run with it. You have so many of these people on YouTube who are LeBron fans. They're not Laker fans, or they weren't Cavalier fans or Heat fans. They're just LeBron fans who, a lot of them, I feel like just, watch the box score after a game and then talk about it like they watched the game. They talk about how great he is, but that's another thing, but for another day. But LeBron, has his way of like passively aggressively using the media to push certain narratives when he wants to. And, that's not really a knock on, his influence, I guess, in the media. Because I guess if anybody had that type of influence, they would use it for their good. But it's just something that it's just overbearing a lot of the time. Because, like I said, because of that media influence, that's what causes, I think, certain players like a Westbrook or even Anthony Davis now, as the season's winding down, he looks like he's mentally checked out. Because there's only so much he can hear about people talking about his inability to stay on the floor before I'm sure it has to be in the back of his mind. And this last time that he came back a couple of games ago, clearly he's not healthy. But for me, it seemed like he was coming back because I guess in his mind, there's kind of pressure on him from the media to show up in a big spot and help the Lakers get into the play-in. Now, it didn't work. They're still going to miss the play-in. But now he and Westbrook, I'm sure, are going to have to sit and listen to day after day, probably through the playoffs, talking about how those guys failed LeBron in a season where he scored 30 points a game to get them to the playoffs. And I think when that's done, it, as I said early on in this episode, the lack of accountability or the lack of blame that gets placed on LeBron throughout his career makes it so that it's so easy to point out those moments where he comes up short, because we hear people go through, twisting themselves into a pretzel to try to justify some things that have happened. I mean, we're starting to hear it with him sitting out the past few games when all we kept hearing about was, LeBron really wants to go for this scoring title, and he had to play a certain amount of games at the end of the year in order to qualify. So now with them having, I think, 3 games left, he has to play in at least 2 of them to qualify for the scoring title. But nobody's talking about how he's sitting out games. Well, he sat out games where their season was in the balance. Even though he was periodically resting down the stretch, I'm assuming, to get himself through a season. But now he's just completely just sat out consecutive games now. And now the team is falling out. And I guess the last thing I'll talk about, because I know this episode's going on a little longer than normal, but like I said, I had a lot that I had to say about LeBron. So I'm going to get it all out there now, and that'll be it. The way that people are, forming opinions on his tenure in LA fascinates me as well. The LeBron people will tell you he won that title in the bubble. They'll tell you it was the toughest championship to win, which is a lie and a joke. And they'll say because of that, his Lakers stint has been a success, which to me is a joke. LeBron went there. He's been there for 4 years. And this was after the Lakers had been down for some time. So the Lakers brought him there. And when they got him there, we were all told that the Lakers were going to be like championship material for as long as LeBron was going to be there. Hasn't happened. First year he gets there, he got hurt late in the year, and he put out his normal tweet about going into playoff mode. Flopped. They missed the playoffs. He shut it down at the end of the year when he realized they weren't going to make it. So he quit on that year. Year 2 was the bubble year. He gets a 3-month break in the middle of the season. Magically, that's the season that he makes it through the whole year. They go in the bubble. They don't have to travel anywhere. So if they had to play like a Denver, no dealing with the mile high, conditions, or if you're playing in Portland or one of those raucous arenas, didn't have to deal with any of that. Played in a bubble, neutral site. I believe for those games there was no fans. Yeah, there was no fans for those. He wins that title, but somehow that was magically the toughest one to win in NBA history. Whatever. Third year, they implemented, third year is the first year they implemented the play-in tournament. Maybe. Or was it the year before? Either way, Lakers stuck in the play-in tournament. LeBron talks about how it's the dumbest thing. He hates it, blah, blah, blah. It was their only way into the playoffs. They win the play-in portion, face the Phoenix Suns in the first round, and get eliminated. Come back this year, make all those moves in his fourth year, bring in Carmelo, Russell Westbrook, bring back Dwight Howard, blah, blah, blah. This team is going to win the West, everybody tells you. They're not even making the play-in tournament. Somehow that's seen as a success. To me, that's a failure. 3 out of the 4 years, you've basically been irrelevant come playoff time. And from what I've been told, you don't go to LA to be a fringe playoff team. You go to LA to win championships. He hasn't done that in any full season, regular season, in LA. The only year he's had success was the 3-month break in the middle of it. And that's the only year, like I said, he and Anthony Davis were relatively healthy at the end of the year. So, form whatever opinion you want to form from that. But to me, that is not a success for a guy who's seen as the greatest of all time, a guaranteed winner, blah, blah, blah. 75% of your time in LA has been a failure. That doesn't cut it for me. But then again, I'm not a Lakers fan, so whatever. Okay, so now the final thing. This whole notion that he's going to stick around until Bronny's able to play in the NBA. And he'll go wherever Bronny gets drafted. And you won't believe this, but some people think that a team should just take Bronny because that means you'll get LeBron out of it. And I'm like, one, I feel like people have overrated Bronny anyway, because people make it seem like Bronny is this like can't miss prospect. He's not even that though. I've seen some highlights or whatever, those Sierra Canyon games or whatever. Bronny doesn't look like a guy I would use a first round pick on right now. But people are making it seem like you would, throw out a flyer on him like late in the first round just to get LeBron. But if I'm getting LeBron, what am I getting with that? A lot of outside noise and baggage, and no guarantee that the season's going to go well because hasn't been a guarantee in LA. And he'll just be older. That means he'll play even less defense. Offensively, he's going to I don't know what he'll be offensively because, he still is allowed to, push his way to the hoop. So offensively, he'll be whatever. But defensively, he's going to become even more of a liability. And then we'll have to deal with the circus of him and his son playing and everybody just talking about that every night. So if I'm any team, I would pass on that whole situation. Draft Bronny if you want, but in terms of the LeBron aspect, stay away from that altogether. And has it ever been asked that maybe Bronny wouldn't want to play with LeBron? Could that not be a thing? Just saying. But yeah, to make it seem like, LeBron has earned the right to play with Bronny and all this kind of stuff, whatever. Like I said, if I'm running the team I'm not doing it. And I'd probably have to make a serious consideration that if it got to the point where I may want to draft Bronny and it came down to Bronny and some other guy who were kind of closely rated, I would take the other guy. Just to not deal with all of that. So, there we have it. I mean, I think I got everything off my mind and off my chest about LeBron. Like I said, this episode was much longer than I normally do. But like I said, this was something that I had been thinking about for a while. I actually wanted to talk about before, but I knew it would be something that I would probably talk about several times in the NBA season. So I kind of want to just wait and just get it all out there once. Because much like this season, I didn't want the Lakers on TV as much as they've been on TV. So I really didn't want to talk about LeBron as much as, some people have, where they talk about him like every day. I can't do it. I'm not going to use all my time to talk about a team or a guy where they're not really factoring in anything. So there you have it. Let me know, like I said, let me know if you agree with what I've said, if you think I'm completely off base, if you think I'm a hater. Let me know. Trust me, I can take it. So you can leave a comment after you listen to this. You follow me on Twitter, like I said. Let me know over there. Because like I said, I will tweet a lot about what I'm watching. So I have tweeted some stuff about LeBron and Lakers. You can let me know what you think there as well. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I really hope you did. Hopefully I gave you some information or some bullet points that you can take with you next time you have yourself a debate about LeBron versus whoever. But yeah, so if you like the episode, make sure to go ahead and share it with somebody as well, and let them know to check out the podcast. Because like I said, I give you guys my honest opinion. I don't try to play favorites or pay into a certain fan base or anything like that. All my honest opinion. So hopefully you can appreciate that. And yeah. So thanks for tuning in. As I said, like, subscribe, share, follow. You know what to do. Do all that good stuff. Help me out. And let's try to create a community here where we just have some smart debates about sports. But as I always say, be safe out there. God bless. Have a great day, night, wherever you listen to this. Hopefully you're just enjoying yourself. And I'll catch you in the next episode. All right? I'm out.